welcome back, and thanks for joining us again. Hope you all are well caffeinated. And I won't say this at the end of today's show, but I hope that you weren't sampling our next speaker's product just yet, because if you are, it'll be a long day for you. A fun day, but a long one. So I'm JP Leous with the World Resources Institute, and please help me in welcoming Phil Hodges, the Executive Vice President for Global Supply Chain at Carlsberg, and his colleague, Simon Hoffmeyer Boas, Director of Sustainability. This morning we've been talking a lot about supply chains and kind of looking upstream, and our friends here from Carlsberg are going to talk to us about the recently released sustainability platform, Together Towards Zero, came out just this June. So Phil, over to you.
JP, thank you very much. We do, of course, have some alcohol-free varieties,
Fair.
and you could imbibe in those. So my name is Phil Hodges. I'm responsible for the supply chain in Carlsberg. I've been with Carlsberg since February of this year, so relatively new to the organization. And I was only a couple of months into my role when Simon approached me, and he said, well, we're coming out with this new ambition. It's Together Towards Zero, and it's 4 zeros, and it's going to be terrific. And I said, okay, so what is it about? And he says, well, it's some commitments we're going to make on the environmental front, on carbon and on water. Safety is a portion of it, and responsible drinking. So I said, okay, so what is it? He goes, well, it's science-based targets. We had the Carbon Trust in, we had World Wildlife Fund in, and we're going to be fine. I said, well, yeah, but you tell me a little bit. Have you spoken to the operators, to the people who are actually going to have to deliver these targets? And he goes, yeah, we've engaged your engineering team, your environment team in the technology group, and we're all set. It really is great because it's 1.5 degrees compliant as far as the Paris Agreement is concerned. I said, but did you speak to the guys who are running the breweries? Do you speak to the guys who are actually going to have to deliver this? And he goes, not really. So the first thing we did is we brought my first line in. So my management team, the people who are running Asia Pacific, Eastern Europe, and Western Europe, and our CPO, the head of procurement. And we said, when we go out with these targets, you have to be able to deliver this. Do I have your commitment? I've been in the company for a couple of months. And what was interesting for me is none of them questioned why we were doing it. They didn't talk about, well, water, it's not one of our major cost drivers. Those words were never uttered. They were saying, yeah, 2022, with some challenges we think we can do. 2030, let's see. I said, don't worry about the 2030. That's so far ahead. Hopefully we'll get some help on innovation, other technologies, and from our partners. But on 2022, I need to be pretty secure that if we go out with this, you can actually deliver. And we got that commitment. A couple of months later, Simon came back again and said, well, it was launched in June, and a couple of months after June, he said, there's this great opportunity to speak at the Responsible Supply Chain Forum in London. Would you like to do that? I said, well, why not? We should share with what we're doing and how we're going about achieving our ambitions. So that was in my mind this week, presentation to deliver. About 4 weeks after Simon had approached me, Case at Heart approached me and said, you've been in the role now for about 6 months. I think it's time that you shared your perspective, your vision, what you think about Carlsberg. And we have a great opportunity for you to do that. It's at the Capital Markets Day. I said, well, that sounds interesting. What's the Capital Markets Day? And, well, it's when we get about 80, 90 people in a room. Half of them are investors who have substantial shareholding in Carlsberg as an organization, and half of them are sell-side analysts, which are either recommending or not the Carlsberg share. So I thought, well, I have the strategy in mind, but I don't have anything down on paper yet. So I beavered away to put something down on paper that I felt I could share with one of our major stakeholders. And so that sort of kind of took priority in my mind to start off with. But now we're here today. So I thought, well, what do I share with you? How do I want to show up? And I thought, well, there's 2 tacks we can take, right? We can do a sustainability environmental tack, or how I run the business. So I decided to do how I run the business. And quite frankly, I've got about 10 charts. 6 of them are straight out of the Capital Market Day presentation. The same information that we shared with our financial stakeholders, I'm going to share with our environmental stakeholders. And hopefully that portrays a certain manner in which we go about running our business. First of all, setting the scene. This was the first chart we showed. The what, the how, and the why. Now, the why for us is pretty straightforward. And we're a foundation. Jacobsen set up the business in 1847. And it's to brew for a better today and tomorrow. And that sort of captures the purpose of what we are. The how is the strategy and how we go about it. And I won't talk about that. You can see that on the net. It's about Sail 22, Fund the Journey, 9-Grid, and the responsibilities. And then importantly, the what. You know? What is our ambition? Our ambition is to be the most successful, the most professional, and the most attractive. And the attractive part, for me, is particularly important. And the attractive it speaks to our stakeholders, you, our employees, our shareholders. But I want to talk a little bit about our employees, because our employees are also consumers and they're also society. And while we have certain numbers to deliver as far as top and bottom line are concerned, that captures their mind. It's the rational thought. That's not what motivates them. What motivates them is what captures their heart. And what captures their heart is our purpose and our ambition, to be the most attractive for them. So let's talk a little bit about what that means. In the integrated supply chain, I have what I would say 3 sort of operating objectives, right? And the operating objectives are optimize cost and asset utilization. And the reason I need to do that is I need to generate fuel. I need to generate fuel for the organization, fuel to help brand building and equity building, fuel to invest into capital investments, such as renewable energy, and fuel to be able to pay dividends. And that's sort of my bread and butter. But I also have to enable the commercial growth agenda. So to make sure that I have the right assets in the right place, with the right technologies and the right route to market. So wherever the consumer is going or wherever we're taking the consumer, our organization can follow. And the third bucket I call mastering cross-functional processes. And mastering cross-functional processes is as simple as, how does a supplier get paid? How does a raw pack material end up in a finished good? What are the signals from customer and consumer back? And these are the operative elements. The operative elements are underpinned by what I would call values. And there's values about quality, about health and safety, and about the environment, in this case, carbon and water. We measure ourselves against a balanced scorecard. And I looked at it today because I couldn't quite remember how many key performance indicators we have, but there's 28 key performance indicators on that chart. Only 6 of them are financial. The rest are efficiency, water and energy is on it. And then, as far as a winning culture is concerned, is our AAA that we use across the organization. So accountability, alignment, and action. So let's talk a little bit about attractiveness for the employees. We can't pretend to be attractive to an employee if we don't have a safe environment for the employee. So one of our zeros, and Together Towards Zero, is 0 accidents. And if you look at the prior couple of years, this is not something we're particularly proud or happy about. Just for a benchmark, world class would be 2. We were 4 or 5 times that very recently. And whilst the team has done a nice job over the last couple of years, we certainly aren't where we want to be. And as you see in 2017, I think you can see a bit of a step change. And what we've done is we've taken safety from being a task to actually being part of our DNA, to drive a safety culture rather than something you have to think about before you do something. And we've done that in 3 ways. First of all is tone at the top. Yeah? So the executive leadership team really living what they're saying. So visibly living what they're saying. We had some severe accidents, so I went back and I looked at where did those severe accidents come from and what were the drivers, and we put life-saving rules in place to be able to eliminate them. So if you want, working in our environment, whether it's in a brewery or in a warehouse, inherently there are some hazardous tasks to do. It's how you go about those hazardous tasks that are important. And I won't go through all of them, but I'll take one. Lock out, tag out. Sometimes you have to go into a piece of equipment, and you need to make sure that when you're in that piece of equipment, there is no latent energy, whether it's electricity or air pressure or whatever. So what we have is a lock, and you lock that piece of equipment. That it cannot start, it has no latent energy, and the person who has the key is the person in the machine. So nobody can start it. You'd be surprised at how many times we've had injuries with people in the machine and somebody else has started it because they didn't realize it was being worked on. But more importantly, these indicators, the lost time indicators, are lagging indicators. And what we're working on is leading indicators. Hazardous environment, near misses. I know an example, I don't know how many bags are on the floor in the walk areas, but that's a potential hazard if there is a bag there. You move the bag to the side or underneath your chair so you can't trip over it. All of last year, across all of our network, we had 42,000 of these sort of observations reported. And that's important to us because we can go and eliminate it. Year to date, we're at over 60, and I'd be disappointed if we didn't double next year, last year's result. Now, why is this important? It's because you're actually working on something that is safe for the employee, but also paramount to the DNA of the organization. And it doesn't stop at safety. While we were bold with our safety ambition, we were certainly bold with our environmental ambitions. We said our carbon footprint by 2030, 0 out of the breweries, and our water, a 50% reduction in water used to produce beer. And we had a stutter step in 2022, 50% reduction in our carbon emissions in the brewery, and a 25% reduction in the water used. Now, those are pretty bold ambitions, and quite frankly, the line of sight to 2022 I have. 2030, I'm not so sure. But this is extremely engaging, in particular to the younger generation and to the millennials. I was talking to my son over the weekend and a little bit about what our environmental credentials are and Together Towards Zero. And he said, so 2030, how are you going to do that? And I said, well, Timothy, I'm not quite sure. And he said, well, that's pretty ballsy, isn't it, when you go out there with that kind of statement? I said, yeah, it is pretty ballsy. So let's see how ballsy it actually is. And this is something we haven't shared with anybody before. It's internal work. But it's to demonstrate that we take our objectives and our commitments extremely seriously. So I know from a base of 2015 where I was in 16 and what I need to do to get to 2017. Yeah? And there are two big buckets to get me to 2022 targets. The first one is best practice application. So if I have common denominator of technology, what is my best brewery or my best network component delivering as far as reduction in carbon emissions? And what is my worst? And how do I get everybody to my best? And that is a big chunk of work that we need to do. The second one is renewable energy certificates, right? And the majority of them today come from either wind or solar or hydropower. And that's what we'll need to be able to buy more of to get to the 50% reduction. Now, some of you may say, that's a bit of a cop-out because you're not actually doing anything, right? You're buying certificates. That's a perspective. My perspective will probably be slightly different. I, in particular, come from a supply and demand world. And the more demand there is, the more supply I have to bring on stream. And the same would be for the renewable energy side. Then after 2022, it gets a little bit more difficult. There, I need to start converting on-site. Right? I need to actually start doing renewable energy on-site. And that is a hugely expensive, today, investment. And quite frankly, today, cost prohibitive. So there I'm looking for innovation. So with whom can we partner to be able to bring those investment costs down? Okay? And then I will still have to go back to the market for more renewable energy certificates. And I hope here where biofuel and biomass, to a certain degree where possible, and environmentally friendly would come on stream to get us all the way to bright. We have a similar ladder on water. Water is a little bit more difficult. So again, best practice application, common denomination as far as technology is concerned, what can I get with the current processes that we have. But then quite quickly, I get into having to recycle water and recycle water into our process already before 2022. And this is where I need your help. Because today, in the vast majority of regulation, I cannot use recycled water in my process, although I know how to do it. And I'm not talking about putting recycled water in the beer. I'm talking just using it in the manufacturing location. So water for me, not sure yet how to get there. Now, I wanted to unpack two examples. The first example is on the efficiency. We are world class in brewing and processing, as you can see from the chart. There's 160 brewers, and we're top tier. And the lower the losses we have, the least water we're actually wasting, right? Or at least energy we're wasting as well. For some reason, that pride that we have in brewing gets lost in filling and packing. You know? It's sort of, we have that annoying problem of putting the liquid into a package to take it to the customer and consumer. This is where I'll get my efficiencies from. World class to be about 80%. I'm not anywhere near close to that. So there's two big buckets that you saw as far as applying best practice. This is where it's coming from. Why is that important? Because if I draw a correlation between line efficiency and carbon and energy usage, there's a direct correlation. The higher line efficiency, the lower the stop and starts are, the less cleaning you have to do, the less energy and water that you waste. The second one is called a closed loop, right? With WWF, we've mapped our breweries against water scarcity. We have 15 breweries that are in high-risk areas or where water is at risk. And we thought, well, what are we going to do about that? So we took 4 of them in India. We took 4 of them and we said, how do we get to a zero liquid discharge? And zero liquid discharge means the contaminants that are in the water are solidified, and you have a stream of water, and you get rid of your contaminants in a different manner. Now, for those of you who saw the previous average of where we were as far as water usage is concerned, you will see that at 3.5, you've taken it off the chart, 3.5, this one is 3.5 hectoliters per hectoliter of beer. We're an average of 3.2. So even in a closed loop today, where we've made investments in 4 breweries in India, we actually don't get below our average. And the reason is, even in these areas where water is scarce, we cannot use the recycled water in our process. So we're actually taking pure water and irrigating the fields, if you wish, with it. And that then goes back into the groundwater and replenishes the reservoirs. So here again, I need your help. In summary, time will tell, right? I mean, don't hold me to the individual buckets, but hold me to the 2022 and hold me to the 2030 responsibilities. I hope I've been able to portray that our sustainability and an environmental impact on what we do is fundamental to who we are. It's not just a sustainability story. It's a foundational element of my objectives, and I'm out there, and you can be the judge of that. We understand our footprint, we extend it extremely well, and we know what needs to be done across our network to achieve our commitments. And we take them very seriously. 2022, I think I can do sort of on my own, if you wish. I know how to get there. The line of sight is there. The water we'll figure out in one way or another. But on 2030, it's much more of an unknown. And it will require a number of things. And this is where I count on our partnerships. I count on innovation. I count on your influence, also the regulators, to help us get to the ambitions that we've set. So with that, thank you, and hand over to questions.
Great, thanks, Phil. And I'm getting a word from the back of the room that we're at time, is that right? So I was given 2 jobs that I accepted taking this role. 1 was to tell bad jokes, and I started the set with that, and 2 is to keep us on time. So that's what I need to do now. But we're not done with Carlsberg. Simon will be on this stage tomorrow morning talking about kind of the backstory on how the team at Carlsberg came up with these targets and kind of the backstory behind Together Towards Zero and how they got to these numbers. So with that, Phil is around. We lose him tomorrow, but he's around for a little bit longer today if you'd like to speak with him after the next session. But with that, please thank Phil for his time.